Mammar, Mayim Rabin, the first Mammar of Parshas Noach. So it says, Mayim Rabim lechabes ava. The raging or the multiple waters can't put out the love. And Haris for you won't be drowned by the rivers. It's not going to, there's nothing you could do that's going to take out the love that we have for Hashem. Even the multiple waters that it's overwhelming won't be able to affect our love for Hashem. So what are these multiple waters that we're talking about that cannot affect our love for Hashem? So the pasuk says, "Hine mayim rabim him kol tirdas haparnasa." They're all the tirdas haparnasa, the botherings and the weight of a person trying to make a living, the anxieties of trying to make a living, from machshavos or thoughts that are in this world. So all things that are sitting on a person, anxieties that are sitting on a person. Traditionally, most of it is usually finance related. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to provide, etc. But all the thoughts, okay, he says, all the thoughts of this world that are sitting on a person. Nevertheless, the Shlomo Melech says, the person sitting under tremendous anxieties, it can't put out the flame of the love a person has for Hashem. Which is the hidden love, that every single Jewish person has, b'teva, naturally, in their godly soul. That the natural soul has a nature, tiva, it's its nature. To elevate and to be clean, to become one, like to be kolel, from the word kolel. Tamid l'mayla, constantly above. It's just like a flame that goes up on its own. Like it says before, hey Sharon, we're starting the first page, Parshas Noach. Like it says, Rishafeha Rishvei Ei Shal Heves Yudke. That the soul is like a flame, which is a flame of Yudke of Hashem. Shehu bechinas shal heves above memayla. The flame is a flame. It comes from above. It's not even coming from the efforts of a person. This actual existence of the soul, as it is, as a gift from Hashem, or as an entity from Hashem, has a natural nature to go upwards towards Hashem. She nefesh alikis, and this is the godly soul. Shekaydim islabshusa beguf, because before the godly soul comes and encloses itself in a body, a gashmi, in a physical form, that was his whole joy. The whole joy of the soul was to take pleasure in the ray of the Shekhinah of Hashem. And is one, absolutely one, with the infinite. The Shekhinah represents Hashem as it's the level of godliness which comes into the world. So he says that it takes ray from the way Hashem is the Ziv, which is the ray of Hashem, which is the level of godliness, which is Memalik Olam. Hashem fills the world, and it's one with the Ein Sof, the infinite, which is beyond the world. So therefore, the natural nature of the soul is to want to be connected and to reconnect to Hashem. So it's always going upwards towards its source. So therefore, that the nature of the soul doesn't change. It's hidden and it's enclosed and almost, so to say, captured by the body. But it doesn't change the actual nefesh alikis's desire to be connected to Hashem, and therefore he says, after the soul comes in and clothes itself and becomes part of the person, the body is la'asik minyan gashim, and when it's in the body, it's part of the body that has to do things that are connected to the world, which are the varm gashim, the world things, and world things make a difference to the soul because its existence seemingly is dependent on that. Shehema nikrai mayim rabim. And now there's these multiple waters that are the anxieties and worries and preoccupations of as the soul is in this world, in the body. Nevertheless, notwithstanding of now, so to say, what we would call distractions that are distracting its focus on Hashem, doesn't change the fact that the soul constantly wants to go above. Meaning to say that the soul's nature to be connected to Hashem is always there. And because it's always there, even as it goes into the body, and seemingly there's all the worries and the concerns and the wants of the body, and the needs of the body. Nevertheless, it doesn't put out the ava, the love, and the desire, the great desire that it has, the alis, to elevate likol lamal, to be included above, to become one with Hashem. But adrab, on the contrary, he says, it speaks specifically because it's in the Mayim Rabim, because it's experiencing the multiple waters, that is pulling, so to say, the attention of the soul away from Hashem. It's able, the soul, only because it's in the Mayim Rabim, is the soul able to reach the levels greater than it could have, or it had before it came down to this world. Kashayis bar, as we explained. So what the Alter Rebbe is basically saying over here, that when Shlomo Melech says in Shir HaShirim that Ma'im Rabim, the great multiple waters, can't extinguish the natural love the soul has, it's not only that it retains its desire, it actually the Ma'im Rabim is, so to say, a springboard, a tool that it helps the soul achieve even higher, greater yearnings towards Hashem. And specifically going through these difficulties, going through these distractions and anxieties is how a person can elevate. So this is the idea, of course, that we learn many times in Chassidus, that the purpose of the soul coming down to this world is Yerida Tzarech Aliyah, is going down to this world for a purpose to have an elevation. If there's no elevation in the descent to this world, hey Barbara, then there's no point of the whole creation, right? Why would the soul come down at max to achieve what it already had? So therefore, it has to be that you achieve something greater. And what's it achieving greater is that we're going to see that in a second. So he said like this: these multiple waters, these distractions and anxieties that a person suffers through. What does this have to do with our parsha? So he says this is called the waters of Noach. As Yeshaya says in chapter 50, in chapter 54, he says, verse 9, Asher nishpati mi'avramei Noach. So he says that I have, the verse says, Kimei Noach zoisli. So he says, for these to me are the waters of Noach. Asher nishpati mi'avramei Noach, that I swore that the waters of Noach, that they will never be again the waters of Noach on the world, meaning God made a promise, a covenant, like we learned at the end of this week's parsha, or towards the middle of this week's parsha. God promises Noach that he will not bring another flood to the world. So too Hashem says, I swear, that I won't be angry from you, or kesef is from God's wrath, or I won't rebuke you. So we see that the Mei Noach is the Ma'im Rabim, as it says in Yeshaya, is the Mei Noach is the waters of Noach. He explains why. What is the word Noach? Why is Noach called Noach? Noach means the word Naicha Derucha, a calming of the spirit. Noach gives off, projects a feeling of calmness. What is kindness? Calmness. What does calmness mean? Shvisa is like a person who rests. For instance, a person who rests from their work, labor. God rested on the seventh day from creating. And the Unkla says, what does it mean God rested on the seventh day? He rested on the seventh day. So why does the Parsha say, El told us Noach, Ish Sadik? Why does it say two times Noach, two times Naicha, calmness? There's a higher level, an elevated level of resting or calmness, and a lower level of calmness and resting. Like we say, there's what's called the lower Shabbos, which we just said before, that God rested on the seventh day. We're on page, I believe page 3 on the left-hand side. That says that Noach rested on the God rested on the seventh day. So that is the Shabbos Tata and Shabbos Ilah. What is the higher level of Shabbos? She lost it. That's going to be when Mashiach comes, which is called Yom Shekuli Shabbos, a day that's full of Shabbos. In Shabbos Tata, the lower level of Shabbos is not a full day of Shabbos, means not constantly Shabbos. It's only what he calls Mashenkin Shabbos Ta, any Kuli Shabbos Kashay is not always Shabbos, as it's going to explain. Meaning to say is that you can reach what's called calmness, that your life goes into, so to say, an absolute calmness where there's no more turmoil, there's no more anxieties, there's no more distractions, or you have moments of Shabbos. So Shabbos Tatar, he's going to explain, is kind of the waves of Shabbos, where you go up and you're able to find on the seventh day rest, and then going back into the world, and there's these waves going up and down. And then as you reach a time where your life goes from the chaos and from the distractions and from the anxieties to a situation of constant calmness. And that's, he says, Shabbos Ilah, the high level of Shabbos. Seemingly, now he's going to go and explain. So Noach is, so what are we saying here? So Noach is calmness. The main Noach is the calm waters. The calm waters are connected to us to not allow for the multiple waters, the Mayim Rabim that Shlomo Melech talks about, that cannot extinguish the love. That means even though there's distractions and anxieties, the love is deeper. And like the Alter Rebbe says, not only is it deeper, the Mayim Rabim enhances the love. So he says like this. So what does this so mean? So he says like this. Seemingly, we're starting the third paragraph on the left-hand side on page 3. Seemingly doesn't make sense. The whole idea of the flood. What was the idea of the flood? If God just wanted to punish and destroy the sinners, the shachis means to destroy the sinners, which seemingly what he wanted, right? He was disappointed with creation. And because he was disappointed with creation, he kills everyone and everything, living thing, aside from Noach and the animals on the ark. So the idea was destruction. Seemingly the Bible was about destruction. Why do you have to make such a big deal about it? I mean, God is God. He didn't have to flood the whole world and wait 120 years and have Noach build an ark. In 1 second, God could have gotten rid of all those things, living beings that he wanted to get rid of without a flood. He's God. He doesn't need the flood to destroy or to get rid of. He could just like they came into being, they could disappear. And what remains is Noach. It doesn't say when Moshe Rabbeinu said, when God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to get rid of all the Jewish people when he's in his anger after the Chet Egel and other times, and I want you, only you'll remain. It doesn't mean he's going to bring a flood to the desert. They're not going to exist. They'll be punished with the punishment quickly of death. So therefore the Alter Rebbe introduces, and this is building up to how, what does it mean? That the Mayim Rabim, the multiple waters, is a force of strength and strengthens the love a soul has for Hashem. Because if the multiple waters is here to punish us and to exhaust us with only a negative purpose, it doesn't have a way to bring us anything positive. But for negativity, God has other ways to do negativity. So what's the idea of the Mabel? So the Abamasi says the truth is, the Mabel came not to punish, but really to purify the world. Like it says, the world turned to chamas, which is all kind of robberies and dysfunctional. It was very broken. The world was a broken system. And God wanted to purify the world. So not to destroy the world, but to put the world through the process of purification. And that's why there was a flood. The flood wasn't necessarily a punishment or all about the negativity. It was a process of purification. Like the water, to cleanse the impurity. It's like a mikvah, memsa, which is the measurement of 40 sa. 40 sa makes up the measurement of a pool of water that could purify something impure in the mikvah. So therefore, the memsa represent the 40 days of the rain, which comes to purify the world of its impurities. Shemitaheres is atame, that comes to purify the impure. So too, just like a mikveh comes, and the purpose of the mikveh is to spiritually cleanse the impurity, so too the waters of the Mabel comes to purify the world. As it says in Yechezkel, it says that God is going to pour upon us water, pure water, and purify us. There's a concept God wants to purify. And that's why the Mabel is called the waters of Noach, because it's not a punishment, it's a calmness. It brings naicha, brings calmness because it brings purification. Okay, so that's the idea of Noach in the time of the flood. But the idea that the Shlomo Melech says that a person goes through Mayim Rabim, that's also a process. So that's how he's explained. Now this is how he's going to explain that the Mayim Rabim is not just doesn't extinguish the fire, the love the soul has for Hashem, but actually enhances it. Because he says, "V'hine shibud parnasa." When a person is under the shibud, the root word of shibud is of course eved. Right? So when a person's enslaved parnasa, to trying to earn a living. And included in that is, like he says, kol machshavas, all thoughts that are distracting a person. That's also waters of calmness, even though seemingly the anxieties and stress. Why? Like it says, that God gave Avram Avinu, our forefather, the option that either his descendants could go through hell, means you live a life, and you're going to live your life as it is, and then the end of that, you're going to have to pay with it through hell. Or he offered him shibud, a process of avdus, of enslavement within their existence, within their life. And the Jewish people had played out, obviously, in the 210 years they were in Egypt, that they should have that should have the effect instead of going through Gehenna of hell. He says, just like a person who passes away, cannot go enter the Garden of Eden after one passes away. You can't just say, well, okay, I lived my life, and now I'm in the afterlife. What do you do in the afterlife? You go into the Garden of Eden. And what do we do in the Garden of Eden? We take pleasure in the ray of Hashem. 1 second, but what kind of person are you? What kind of life did you live in this world? That you could just leave the world and then go back into the Garden of Eden and just as if nothing happened. So you can't just go right away into the Garden of Eden to take in the ray of Hashem. You have to go through a process of cleansing. Like it says about Acher, who was the Elisha ben Avo, the teacher of Rameir, that when Rameir was questioned what should be with him after he dies, should he just not take part in the world to come, or should he have to go through a difficult cleansing process in hell and be able to participate in the world to come? So Rameir said, Mutev dilidainei, let him go through judgment, and the judgment is a harsh judgment. Hell is not, like Job says, as bad as things may seem here for a person's life, doesn't come close to the experience of hell. So, but Rameir said in his case, Mutav dilidaine, let him go through, be judged in hell, and let him come to the world to come, than to be able to go to the world to come. Means have a person, basically, Rameir was asked, should he have a status quo of being a person who's not let in, or go through the difficulties of getting in? So he says, let him go through the difficulties of getting in, because that's how important it is, and that's how pleasurable it is for the soul to be in the Garden of Eden. You have to go through a process. And like it says, V'gam litfol b'nahar dinar, we know that even elevation within heaven itself, the souls have to be dipped in the nahar of dinar, which is a reference of it is in Daniel, which is an idea of like a burning river that souls have to go through, which is a forgetful process, which is a cleansing process, be able to elevate to higher realities within Gan Eden itself. So too, just like a person through difficulties of experiences of hell with the Nar Dinar are able to experience high revelations in the afterlife, so too Shibud, a person who goes through avdus, a person who goes through difficulties. And here we're talking about the Mayim Rabbins, the difficulties of providing and of making a living, and all that is what is included in that. That helps a person elevate. Just like a person needs to go through hell to elevate into the world to come, it's a process of purification. So it's not a punishment. It's not God's punishing the person. It's a process of purification because you want to be able to get to a higher reality. And here the Alter Rebbe says it's not just to get back to where you were. Because again, there's no purpose of an exercise to get back to where you were. The idea is to be able to get to a higher place than you were before. Otherwise, there's no purpose. Their soul could just stay in heaven. So the fact that the soul comes down to this world, that's what he says in the beginning. The Mayim Rabbin brings it to a kind of love that it wouldn't experience had it not gone through these difficulties, whether that includes the sinning and needing the cleansing of the sinning, or in general, the purification. So he says like this. What does it mean, shibud? That a person goes through difficulties. Because it's not like today you have a king. Pay taxes, right? Alter Rebbe says a person may think, what's difficulties? I'm paying my taxes. I'm going through life. It's hard to make ends meet. There was also kings, not just now in Galus, where we have governments that are expecting from us, but also in the times of the temple. There was kings. We know that Solomon had a high tax bracket for people. Everyone had to give 1/10 to the king. So he's not talking about the fact that you have to give something, When the temple was standing, there was such a flow of blessing that people were happy to be able to provide for others and to give towards the, so to say, the pool of the government to provide. He says, there was tremendous blessing and flow. The land of Eretz Yisrael was Eretz Zavas Chalav Dvash, a land flowing of milk and honey. There was substance. Everyone had enough income, and then some. That was beyond nature. So in the times of Shlomo Melech, the Jewish people lived in a comfort that was beyond nature even. As it says in the end of Ksubis, people did not suffer from worries, and daigus is concerned of the preoccupation of making of putting yourself through a difficulty of making a living. So therefore they were happy to. So the idea is not that you have to give something. Giving is not the problem. Is to have what to give is the problem. And therefore you have, because they were able to, in the times of King Solomon, they were blessed with Ish Tachas Gafni, Ish Tachas Tainasai. The Torah testifies of the blessings of King Solomon. Therefore people, it wasn't difficult to give. But now their person is that really can provide for himself or can't even provide for himself. All that anxiety is difficulties. That's the shibud. That's the difficulty. But now a person has to go through Yegia, toil. And the preoccupations of providing, you have to put yourself into the things that you have to do in this world. That creates Ma'im Rabim. So again, Adol Chassidus traditionally coins the Ma'im Rabim as the Tirdis of Parnasa, the difficulties of making a living and getting by. It includes, like the Alter Rebbe said in the beginning, Kol Machshavos. If a person, Baruch Hashem, is blessed, that's not their concern. There's other things that are on your mind that are drowning you out, so to say. Shnikr Mei Noach, but nevertheless, those are called the waters of Noah. It means the person who's suffering through the anxieties looks at it as difficulties. But the Alter Rebbe says, no, it's Mei Noach, it's calm, it's really calm waters. She bechinis naiche derucha, calms the spirit. Lifi why? Shaydei bechinis ma'im rab now, because only through the experience of going through these difficulties, mis'alis haneshama, is the soul able to elevate to such levels that the soul was never able to achieve before that. The comfort the soul had in its existence in heaven, to just be there without any worries, without any complications, and in such an environment to love God is not so difficult. Right? Like in days of King Solomon, to pay taxes when you have a lot of money isn't so difficult. You may not like it, but it's not so difficult. But only when the soul goes through difficulties and challenges and exhaustion and drowning, does it able to have elevations that it did, the comforts that it didn't have in the world in before it came down to this world, is able to achieve heights that it wasn't able before. That over there they were only able to take pleasure, but in this world they're actually able to connect with the essence of God through Torah mitzvahs. Like he says, K'mayim Rizal, our rabbis have taught us. That says in Pirkei Avot that Yafa Sha'achas B'Tshuv Ma'asim Tovim B'Leil Mazeh. It's better for a person to be 1 hour of time of tshuva, of repentance, of return, and good deeds in this world, in all the world to come. It means everything you could achieve in the world to come, all the great connection to the ray of the Shekhinah is nice, but it's here in the moment, in the difficulty, in the grind, is where you connect with the essence. This is the traditional idea of the light, the benefit of the light that comes through an experience of darkness. Dafka specifically, shubechinas, the person has to go through is skafia, restraining yourself, and sitracher, the other side, and to transform the darkness. Again, the sufferings and the difficulties here he's alluding to is not just the overwhelming challenges of getting by, but the overwhelming challenges of the temptations of the world. And in this world specifically, the soul has no temptations, has no struggle, not in a material way, and not in a spiritual way, and not in a pleasure way that it has that has to deal with in this world. And therefore, only these difficulties are able, the Ma'im Rabim are able to bring the soul to a place it would not be able to achieve on its own. Like he says, when a person is thrown into a constant day of the difficulties, of the challenges of providing for themselves and their family, that's a dark experience. It's difficulty. And then the person, after that, rips themselves away. Now here, this you could learn this part as just the ripping away from the anxieties, which is difficult because you're suffering from challenges in this world. So you could think that just ripping away yourself from that experience and going to the daven and thinking about Ein Lecha Esav, there's no existence in this world, not even a blade of grass. Lamat in this world, it doesn't have a force, a powerful force above that makes it grow. It's not growing on its own. There's a force of life. There's the mazel that's connected to that special piece of blade of grass that helps it grow. Excuse me, the Shem Mazalis, which are we call them Mazalis, Shem Mashpim Chayis, they're the forces that give life from Hashem, Kol El Mazen, this world. Like it says in the verse of Zos HaBracha that we just finished, it says, when we meged Tfuas Shemesh, when we meged Gerish, Yerachayim, that the sweetness of the produce of the sun and the sweetness of the moon's yield, meaning to say that this mazalis, which is referring to the way Hashem blesses through the fruits and vegetables that come from the sun and those that benefit from the moon. And these mazals that are a force, that give energy to the world, they're taking from a system, what's called the 70 Sarim, the 70 representatives of each nation. We know there's 70 nations in the world. So each one, that's why there's different countries that yield different results. Because each country has its own Sar, its own ruler, so as the master above, that its concentration is its specific country. Basarim, and where do these masters, these ministers, take their energy from the system, so to say, the ecosystem of godliness? They get it from the level, what's called the leftovers of the angels. The afanim, which are a lower level of angels, they receive from the angels. It's an entire spiritual system of life that it brings down the force of blessing all the way down that this little blade of grass should grow further. And where does all the existence come from? From the Malchus, God's kingship, that is itself after the tzimtzum of God becoming king. That's like we say, God be the king over the whole creation. So the whole creation is going to benefit from God being king. That the fact is that when you have what to eat, and you have, so what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here is, so you can look at it in two ways. One is the person who just rips himself away from the anxieties of life to go into what's called, like we learned that Baal Shem Tov says, Boil Teva, go out of the waters of the Mabul and go into the Teva, into the comfort, the security, the safe space of the ark. And the words Teva also means the letters and the words of davening. But it's not just that you leave what, so to say, the mundane to go into the spiritual. It's because you're experiencing difficulty in the mundane. It means what's the example that Alter Rebbe is giving? He's not giving an example of a person who rips themselves away from the mundane to think about Yichud Eilah, Yichud Tata, the greatness, so to say, the abstract greatness of God. It's specifically related to the person's challenge, because you're challenging to provide. So the worldly things is not an abstract concept. You know that for me to live, for me to put food on my table, it has to come from somewhere. So your dependence on the food, so to say, and on the success of your efforts makes you realize the importance of it. And they say, but where does this come from? Where does the grass come from? Where does the wheat come from? Where does the food come from? There's a system. There's a system that there's an angel, and there's a mazel, and there's an efanim, and there's a malachim, and it all comes from bechinas malchus. It's because you're aware of the necessity of it. It's not easy. So you appreciate the system of Hashem. I mean, say it's only because the difficulties bring you to the appreciation. That's why he's saying the Mammar Rabbim actually brings the soul to reality. The soul, when it's away, when it's disconnected, when it's in heaven, there's no dependency. It just exists. It doesn't understand the difficulties of things. It's only because when you go through the difficulties, you appreciate the whole system of creation. It's God's kingship that's on the world. God creates the entire world from nothing to something, and it's because you're part of that story. Like, it says that we learned last year, the Alter Rebbe says about the difference between Adam and Eve before eating from the tree of knowledge and afterwards. That the angels also knew about the existence of evil, but it didn't bother them. It wasn't personal. It didn't matter to them. It was a concept. But now it's not a concept to you anymore. You're living the experience. And therefore, you say, God's kingship's over the world. You recognize and you're feeling God's creation constantly from something to nothing into something. And then when you realize that itself is only a ziva shechina bivad, that's not the essence of God. That's define God as a creator. He is a creator, but that's not defined him. So basically, you're climbing the ladder of tefillah. That's why we start with the Pesukah de Zimra. And from Pesukah de Zimra, we go to Krishma. And from Krishma, we go to Shemona Esrei. It's only because of going through this experience, you're reaching higher and higher till that you realize that's only the Ziv.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Besides, when we just read the Parshas Bereishis, so besides the tree of good and evil, and then, of course, they eat from that, but then there's a passage that says, lest they eat from the tree of life and live forever. So it's like a separate tree, or it's the same tree from a different aspect that we haven't eaten from, that we're mortal. How do you understand that tree?
Okay, so because not directly connected with learning, I'll answer you too short. We actually learned this last year in the Mammar on Parshas. The tree of life was a tree that gave everlasting, that would give, so to say, everlasting life. The Alter Rebbe asked then, what was the man only received the punishment of death because they ate from the tree of knowledge. So they were anyway supposed to live forever. So what was God concerned about them living forever? Nothing changed. That was the plan initially. But the difference was they were going to live forever before they ate from the tree of knowledge, which was bad. And when you ate from the tree of knowledge, God didn't want the evil to exist forever. Because evil became part of our existence, that the struggles from within. It's not an outside force. It's something that became part of us. So therefore Hashem said, no, once that you've eaten from the tree of knowledge, then it's harmful to eat from the tree of life. The tree of life was its own, was in a concept that brought a person above the limitations of creation, that the right and wrong didn't matter. Death is connected to right and wrong because we've eaten from the tree of knowledge, and we brought bad to us, and we behave on that bad. So therefore, there's death in the world. The tree of life would override that system, notwithstanding of your behavior, you would live forever, and that God didn't want. So he banished us from the Garden of Eden. But the idea of the tree of knowledge.
Is there a going back in being able to have the tree of life?
It is the tree of life, and that is when the Mashiach comes, when we get rid of the tree of knowledge, or the evil. When the tree of our connection to the tree of life can only come back once we rectify, which is what our avodah has been and is until Mashiach comes, is to fix to eradicate the remains of the tree of knowledge.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So he said like this, and the person continues the build-up, like we do in Tefillah, to the blessings before Krishma, to the essence of God. Which is the infinite, is, will be, and was. There's no change in the essence of God. Like it says, and all this a person realizes. It means the way you climb the ladder is because you're in the mud. That's the point. It means that there's if you don't get the shake in life, you don't get a bit of a shackle, like they say. So you take in what you take in. You don't explore further. It's only the challenge that makes a person explore. First of all, you start with appreciation of what you have because you don't take it for granted, and that brings to the person's realization that there's beyond the force of creation, so to say. There's the infinite of Hashem, which is Hoya Hoya, is, will be, and was, beyond time and space. When a person goes through this, his bonus contemplation, again triggered by the Mayim Rabbim, and pulling yourself out of those waters, going into the Teva, going into the words of Tefillah, in the depth, applying your knowledge. So the yield that you get from that, the love that you get from that journey of experiencing what you're going through, and the realization of the levels of godliness beyond that, it's real to you. So he says, therefore, when you awaken, you arouse the soul, a love and a yearning, of a fire. You don't want to be in this darkness anymore. And it's consumed with a gashmi that's tied down to the physical and material. Why am I motivated? What is my checks and balances all about? The parnasa and the livelihood. Why is this guiding me? So this is pulling you higher. It's a force. It's a tension that's pulling you higher. You want to get out of that kind of limitation, that definition. That's you don't want your relationship of Hashem to only be a relationship dependent on God helping you, providing for you, helping you get through the day. And you want to just cleave to the infinite of Hashem that's beyond just the provider, so to say. I'm not looking for what heaven or what's with you. I want the essence of God himself. But that realization only comes through that experience. You're not driven, you're not interested in the lower level of Garden Eden, not by the higher level of Garden of Eden. Realizing what realizing the exchange of your present relationship with Hashem, which is dependent on your dependency, makes you to want to get out of that dependency. And therefore you want it's not about Garden of Eden, it's not about Ray, it's not about more light or less light. I want only God himself. That was not Alter Rebbe was always saying that. The Rebbe quoted the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandfather say, "I don't want your Garden of Eden. I don't want your Garden, your Olam Haba. I just want you. I don't need all these experiences, all these rewards." That the world to come in the Garden of Eden is just about sitting here and basking in the ray of Hashem. And I don't want the ray. That's another form of reward. I want himself. I want God himself. To be one with the essence of God, like it says, the Zohar says, to become one with the body of the king. And that's what it means to return. And returning, that's why tshuva is connected to everybody. Tshuva is not about sinning, because the tzaddik needs that tshuva also to get to that level. The tzaddik is just like the perfect soul that never went down to this world. Only with tshuva, only with the stronger strength, so to say, that comes through the difficulties, is that's the return that you go higher. Shabbat dafka only comes from a dark experience. Because you feel so the disconnect and the smallness of your being preoccupied constantly in worldly things. Because the light will only come from darkness. You need to go through an experience of darkness to reach the light. And this is what it means when we say in the Shema that you love Hashem with all your might. No limits. To reach no limits is you have to be extremely limited. Only comes from the opposite of limitless, of the limited of darkness. Good alone, that's Malchachaim. That's the angel of life. But there's never a challenge. That's good. That's okay. It's good. You want Tov Ma'od, you want very good. That comes from death. That comes from challenge. That comes from darkness. From the opposite of life. And darkness. That comes from the struggle that a person has with their animal within them. Only through that you could reach the love of all your might. Because now he's going to deduce a new idea. It's not just the experience of the challenge that is the force to break through that brings a person to a higher place, but it's also the force itself is from a higher place. The darkness itself, the challenge of the animal, comes from a higher place. What does that mean? And these are the kings. It says in Parshas Vayishlach, the kings of Esav, which represent the kings of chaos, which represents the concept of the animal soul, are the kings before the kings of Israel, it says. Not just that they were there before in time, but before in greatness. The kings of Israel is the godly soul. But when the kings that were on a higher level, because they were so high and they were not lights that could be settled, so they caused Shir HaShirim. This is the concept of the breaking of the vessels. So therefore, Nafalamata, this energy, this tremendous energy, Hey Ariel, falls all the way below. Like it says, they were kings, but then they died. But they come from a higher space. Their initial source of energy is from a higher space. Therefore, they're able to. Why is the Nefesh Bahamas? Why is the animal soul so powerful against the godly soul? Why can't the godly soul just break through? It's because its root is very strong. And dealing with that challenge, and because that challenge in its root is so strong, it's actually itself the springboard. So it's not just that it's a, you have sometimes a force that just to break the force itself is not anything. It's just the exercise of breaking the force that yields a benefit. He's saying, no, the force itself is strong. And engaging in the force, when you get through that challenge, the force that you've overcome itself lifts you up. Because it comes from the level of kingship, which is elevated, and it's higher at its source, so to say, than the nefesh halikis. And that's again why we eat. Same famous question we've asked many times. Why does a person have to eat from food and animals? Without eating food, you can't live. The food does, it may need the so to say, a person to plant it, but it doesn't need the person, doesn't siphon off doesn't live off a human. An animal doesn't, the animal kingdom doesn't need to know of the existence of humans. They've been doing their own thing for many years. Because they're higher than the people. And he calls not just the Adam, but the Shar, even the Nefesh Halikis. And therefore doesn't need it. Although to tikkun, to fix it, we need man is to take that broken pieces of energy and put it back together. So therefore, when we become, our body, our godly soul enters, so to say, the animal soul within us. And because of that, to provide for the animal soul, it has to go into the worries and the thoughts of making a living and dealing with worldly things. Again, these are the multiple waters. Only that way you could reach Ma'od. Ma'od, yes, Ma'od is Malach HaMavis, the angel of death. There's a lot of negativity over there. But in that negativity, there's a source of positivity, which means, what Alter Rebbe is explaining is a very important point. The challenge itself is not just that the challenge, that the difficulties is coming from an outside negative force. It's really itself a positive force, but it's a positive force that's been broken. And that kind of contradiction where it has a source that's very strong and at the same time it's broken is why it creates both a challenge and also an elevation at the same time. But therefore, because it comes from a level of limitless, and because the soul engages in that negativity, in that brokenness of the world, is it both have the challenge, but through that it also has the elevation much greater than when it had before it came down to this world. And this what it means in Chassidus, the concept of iskafia, where a person has to restrain themselves from the negative side that is pulling you towards negativity, whether it is the anxieties or stresses that's pulling a person down, or to transform that negative into the darkness, into light. Because like we said before, there's a benefit the light receives that comes from choshech, from darkness, from difficult and negative experiences. Again, because it's not just that the negativity brings out, it's not that the negativity brings out something within you from your godly soul. It's actually giving you something. And therefore, it's much greater than the godly soul could achieve on its own. Because a person would say, if I really have it, is there a way for me to find it and to reveal it without going through the challenge? And Alter Rebbe says no, because you don't have it. The elevation that you have only specifically comes from the darkness, because the darkness is more powerful, because it comes from a higher root, because at its root, before it was broken, it was complete, it was a king, and it was a king koidim, before the kings of Israel. Only after it broke and it fell down, like it says, he quotes the verse, top of page 5 on the right-hand side. Vayimlach, they were kings first, but then Vayamis, they died. Vayidei iskafia, but when you restrain yourself, here he says an amazing line. Vayidei iskafia, when a person restrains themselves and doesn't let, it means there's the force of negativity, but doesn't let the negativity, the broken part, the broken pieces of the negativity weigh and bring you down. So Naasat Chis Amesim says an amazing thing. It's a resurrection of the dead. The Vayamis, the death that the negative forces experience through the brokenness, by you restraining yourself, you resurrect that dead to being the Vayimlach, the king it was before, and that king is greater than who you are, and therefore you take the elevation by resurrecting the dead of that evil force or that negative weight that's sitting on you. This is why our rabbis have taught us. Better for a person to go through 1 hour of return and good deeds in this world from the Mikol Chayim above, from all what you could achieve in the world to come. And that's why, again, these waters are not called waters of negativity, but waters of calmness, of Noach, Why? Even though they're suffocating and drowning waters, because of what you could achieve through them. Because if utilized properly and you don't allow yourself to be drowned by them, it actually becomes waters of a spirit of calmness. You become that, you build the teva. The teva is what helps you float above the water. Like we said, now he quotes the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. These are the words of the davening again, that you only really appreciating the tefillah because you are understanding the tefillah on a different level now, because it's your experience. Bring everything into the words of davening. Bring your whole existence, your whole family into the worlds of the tefillah. This is what it means, that the waters became very powerful, and they elevated 15 arm lengths above the world, meaning above the ground. Different arguments of what that means exactly, but let's just say above any part of the ground. Which means these are the waters that are building and building and rising of the animal soul that's bringing down the godly soul in the suffocation of Esek HaParnas, of a person who's preoccupied and trying to provide for themselves, Binyan Gashim and worldly things. But because those waters are elevating, Or becomes a benefit of the light. And therefore the ark only lifts up. What lifts it up is that water itself. The same water that was trying to drown you ends up elevating the ark above the water. Only because there's the water. Does the words of tefillah elevate? Again, it's the complications, it's the experiences that you go through. The words become alive and the words start elevating on their own through above the water. And Alter Rebbe says, this is the mistake. A business person or a person who's oisik, is preoccupied in worldly things, they may think, how could I daven like a person who sits a whole day and studying? I'm so busy in the world. He says, no, those people are not experiencing the world. There's no waters that are elevating their tefillah. On the contrary, it's the opposite. You could daven greater because your waters, that your distractions are much greater. Again, because it's only the light that comes through the darkness. Again, this is why Noach's waters are calming waters. Shabbos, like we said before, Noach is the idea of Shabbos. Like it says, because you've rested, you've become calm from all your labor because of the labor. In the 6 days of the week. That's how Hashem is creating in the world the 6 days of creation. God created light. Let there be the heaven, to let the earth give off the pasture. Days of work. The idea of Shabbos is you are resting from this preoccupation. And a resting of the spirit. The world elevates on Shabbos, like a person who rests from the work. So too, just like God rested on the seventh day, so to a person who's preoccupied in their worldly matters, which we said before, are the multiple waters. When a person leaves that space, leaves that anxiety, goes into the ark of prayer, this is a calmness of the spirit. Shabbos is like a personal Shabbos experience that you go through on a daily period of leaving, going into the ohel, going into the tent, going into the teva, whether it's davening or a shir or learning, saying Tehillim in the middle of work. Like we know, every time we daven throughout the week, it's taking a spirit from Shabbos. So that he says, everything we just said until now. That's the first Noach. That's only Noach of the struggle. That you get the Noach, you get the calmness because of the struggle. There's a higher level. It's the elevated level of Shabbos. So this is what's going to be when Mashiach comes. Shabbos is going to be all Shabbos. There's going to be no waves of in and out. This is what Yeshaya says. I promise there will no longer be the waters of Noach, just the lower levels. Although there's a positive, we said before, it's not a negative. The waters of Noach are coming to purify a person. And here's the famous line the Alter Rebbe says, Not always does a person have to purify themselves. It means purifying yourself is this whole exhausting level of going through the difficulties, becoming impure, purifying yourselves. There's an idea that you have to get beyond that. You've already become pure. We know kedusha is higher than tahara, right? So it says, I promise that there's going to be a time where there no longer will be the anger of the main Noach. There'll be no longer the anger, the rebuke that comes with it. Now, although we just said the benefit of darkness that brings the benefit of a greater light, which is brings out to the great love of all your might, ma'od, tov ma'od. Nevertheless, there's a level of love that's a gift from above. That's even greater than the love you could get through the challenge of the great multiple waters. And this is what it says in Shir HaShirim, my right hand hugs you. That is a hug that's not conditional on the small doich on the left hand that pushes you. And when are we going to feel this great love and hug from Hashem? Is going to be when the Mashiach comes, like it says, the kindness will not leave you, and the bris, the covenant, will be forever. Which is going to be a great kindness, and tremendous love that comes from Hashem, that God is going to hug us in a way that's beyond the ups and downs.
You can experience that momentarily before that happens too, though, right?
Say that again?
We can also experience that momentarily before Mashiach comes, before that happens.
But that's he's saying that's the main Noach, that's the levels of Noach, that's the lower level, but the consistency of Yom Shekula Shabbos, that's all good. There's going to be no negative. That the idea that there's no negative is going to be only when Mashiach comes. And that's why it says, he doesn't say it out, but this is what he means. We
can experience it, but only for short
periods of time.
Yeah, exactly.
He says, this is what it means. It's going to be, it says about Mashiach, the word ma'oid is also the same letters as Adam, right? Aleph Daled Mem of ma'oid, the Mem Aleph Daled makes up Adam, makes ma'oid. It says Mashiach is going to be greater, Gava ma'oid, greater than Adam. Adam is the experience of the lower level of Noach, but Mashiach is going to come, it's going to be greater than Adam, greater than Ma'od, a level of Ma'od that is going to be consistency. Yom Shekul Shabbos, the right hand's hugging us, and may it be speeding in our time. Laila Tov, thank you for joining. And
thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Laila Tov.